Hi, everyone, and welcome to Riot Radio. I'm William McGinn, and this is the first episode of my new show, Weldon Witness, bookworm, film geek, and friend. And we're going to be talking about book and movie reviews. But first, I'd like to introduce myself a little. I am the author of a novel series called The Blacktop Brothers, and I wrote the first book when I was 11, and it got published when I was 13. If you're watching this rather than just listening to it, this is the cover. I drew it the day that I finished the book. It's called The Blacktop Brothers, and then it goes from a sequel called The Blacktop Brothers 2 Mountain Mission, then The Blacktop Brothers 3 Drop Zone Madness, and The Blacktop Brothers 4 Years Ago or From Now. And the last book is going to be published in a few weeks from now. Just depends on how tough my schoolwork is. So I basically started book reviewing when 2014 started, when my parents got me a book called Michael Vey, The Prisoner of Cell 25. Right beside me is the last book in the series that was just released a month ago, but I wasn't into reading that much, even though a year ago I first published the first Blacktop Brothers. But I decided this is Christmas and there's nothing else to do. I want to relax. I'm going to give this book a try. And the introduction was okay. Some secret organization looking for these two kids, okay. And Michael's introduction, that's all right. But then immediately it hooked me for its relatability and understandable cruelty. A lot of people have been bullied, but let's just say that Michael Vey is a 15-year-old kid that's up against three bullies, Jack, Mitchell, and Wade, and they are known for stuffing people into lockers, and one time they pantsed Michael's best and some would say only friend, Austin Liss, whose name is Ostin, not Austin. He had to walk home from school naked from the waist down one time because of this. And also, Michael lives alone with his mom in Meridian, Idaho, where she had to quit her job from being a law firm to working at a grocery store because Michael accidentally revealed something about himself, and something that's very dangerous and something that Michael's mom is trying to hide from the world, especially some sort of organization. And here's the thing. One day when Michael ends up shocked, he ends up revealing electric powers. Basically, I sped through it, and I'll talk about these in book reviews more. I'll talk about more why I liked it. I got a little carried away, but let's just say I sped through it in 3 days, and all of a sudden, every book that I saw at a bookstore just dared me to pick it up. Every time I go into a library and bookstore now, every book in the teen section dares me to read it and give it a shot. But some of the books aren't as good. Actually, very few are as good as Michael Vey, but some of them are nearly as good. So I decided to start a book reviewing site because I felt like I was reading so much that I want to turn this into a big project, maybe one day a career. So what about movies? Well, you see, in 2010, M. Night Shyamalan, the famous director behind The Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, After Earth, had released a movie called The Last Airbender, and it was based off of the cartoon Avatar: The Last Airbender. And it got just a 6% on the review site Rotten Tomatoes, which I was addicted to ever since the first Hunger Games movie started off at 100%. And that 6% got me very curious. What did they do wrong? So I decided to watch it, and it turns out I loved it. So much so that I even got a judgment of my own about why I thought the reviews weren't quite right and maybe a little harsh. I mean, I never say that a review is just wrong because that would be disrespecting someone else's opinion. And there are hundreds of people out there where I will write a review they disagree with. But the point is, I wanted to put in my view, like all the critics do on Rotten Tomatoes. So in May of 2014, Weldon Witness was born. I've been reviewing books there and movies there for the past 3.5 years. You can go to www.weldonwitness.com if you're more curious. And I'm going to be saying welcome to Weldon Witness for the next few weeks, so you probably won't be able to forget it anytime soon. I won't let you. So, for my first episode, I'm going to be talking to you about easy books to read as well as action movies. Easy books to read because I feel too much like people see books as a chore. So, I'll get to that after a small music break. So, don't forget to have a look at us on Twitter and Instagram at DCSI Riot Radio. For now, here's a break, and I hope you enjoyed my hope it wasn't too long introduction. Hi everyone, I'm back. So as I said before, I'm going to be talking about books that are easy to read. But first, let me explain to you why I'm starting this off with books that are easy to read, rather than something like a fantasy book or a good comedy book. Well, everyone that I know that doesn't really like to read books, well, they probably see reading books as a chore. They don't see it like watching a movie or playing a video game or streaming videos. And you know what? They might have a different hobby. Like they might be a musician, or you might be a musician, you might be an athlete, you might be hoping to do science experiments for the rest of your life. And you know what? That's perfectly fine. I really support your idea. And if you don't like reading, then that's perfectly fine as well. I'm not going to be like one of those moms or dads that forces you to take time off whatever you're doing and read. Even if you want to be, say, something that parents would disapprove of, like a video game tester, then that's your dream. I'm not going to tear you away from it. But I would probably disagree with you. No, I would certainly disagree with you if you said that books were boring. They're not. I thought for a short time in my life that they were too, but then I thought, what about the Captain Underpants books, which I read as a kid, or the Diary of a Wimpy Kid books? I have some criticism actually of the Diary of a Wimpy Kid books, but that's another story for later. The point is, kids like to read, and the Harry Potter books, when they came out, convinced more kids to read than any other book in the entire world. So I thought I'm going to share some books that you'll be able to read, and then you'll be able to zip through them so fast it won't feel like a chore, and they'll be a lot of fun. So to start off, as I mentioned, I'll be discussing Michael Vey a little further. So when Michael Vey ends up attempting to be pantsed by those bullies, and in full view of his crush and the most popular girl at school, Taylor Ridley, Michael can't take it anymore. He exposes his secret and shocks these bullies so hard that they end up flapping like fish out of water and end up charred a little bit. They're okay, don't worry, but yeah, Michael promises to triple at what he did if they ever bully him again. Case in point, Michael Vey has electric powers. He has electricity zooming through his body. His mom owns an electric car, and Michael can just touch it. Pulse is what he calls it, and then the electric car's all good to go. So, and it turns out that 15 or so years ago, there was an accident with this machine called the MRI in California that killed off hundreds of babies at a California hospital, and only 17 of them survived. And it turns out Michael is one of them, and it might also be someone that he already knows about. And case in point, I'm not going to spoil the whole thing, but there are some electric children that are Michael's age with these superpowers. Some good, some evil. And, well, Michael Vey has so much stuff to admire about it. From the get-go, it grabs your attention because an easy book to read needs a good beginning. And like I said, the bully part of this related to me because I started writing the Blacktop Brothers because in 6th grade I was bullied. Thomas F. Wilson, who plays Biff in Back to the Future, he was bullied as a kid. My roommate was bullied a lot as a kid. And a lot of people are able to really show off their feelings for being bullied this way, and the author Richard Paul Evans really succeeds in my opinion. But that's not the only thing. The superpowers have a very nice sci-fi element to them. They're not entirely implausible. They don't just say they have superpowers and that's that. They really explain how these superpowers work. Like, one of them is able to stop these waves that go through your brain to make you forget something. And there's mild electricity that runs through our bodies. So if someone is able to harness this power with a bit of an enhanced brain or something, and our brains can possibly do a lot more if they were at higher than they are. And also, another one has electrolocation. He is completely blind, but he can still see. He uses electrolocation, which is feeling the electric waves, like how sharks see through muddy water to see stuff. This really enhances it because he can see when there are weapons nearby, and he can even cheat at cards because he can see what everyone's holding in their hands. But my favorite one is the one of this character named Zeus has. And you see, he is named after the Greek god, I get it, but he has powers that are similar to Michael's. He can shoot lightning bolts, but the thing is, he was born with permanent electric makeup smeared on his skin, and as a result, whenever it touches water, it conducts. As a result, he is unable to touch water, and as a result, he can't bathe without shocking himself. Just a little drip of water can cause a blister, and as a result, he has built up a very powerful and unpleasant smell, and it makes him very unattractive to a lot of people and repulsed to a lot of people. And this has caused him to be very sensitive and have a big temper about it too. I really appreciated what the author Richard Paul Evans came up with because, I mean, I'm autistic and sometimes I feel really weird and sometimes I feel a little isolated too. And the way Zeus is able to still carry on with his life caused me to think, I actually have a crush on this character. Zeus was my very first male crush, and I know that sounds lame considering he's a fictional character, but I can only tell the truth. So Michael Vey is not only an easy book to read, but it changed my life, but I actually like the second book, Rise of the Elgin, even more. It's to this day one of my favorite books of all time. And I rate books on a 4-star scale. The first two Michael Veys have both 4 stars out of 4. The other 5 are a bit lower in my opinion. But I'm not going to bore you with too many details. This is the 7th Michael Vey I have here. It just came out a month ago, and when I got it, I couldn't put it down. Every night I would read like 80 pages or 150 even. And let's just say for the past few years, every time a Michael Vey book comes out and I spot it at the bookstore, I immediately get it, no questions asked, and I put aside anything else I'm reading to read this. Almost no books do that, but Michael Vey managed to pull it off. So the next book that I'm going to be talking about that's easy to get through is The Selection by Kiera Cass. It's a pretty famous trilogy, or it used to be a trilogy. Now it's a series of 5. I've only read the first 3, but it goes from The Selection to The Elite to The One. And then there are 2 books that take place about 30 or so years after the first one. Those are called The Heir and The Crown. But basically, The Selection is a world in which the American state of China, which is basically in terms North America, now has people sorted into ranks, and they are ranked by numbers, like from 1 to 7. A 1 is the royals, the ones that probably don't suck at golf, and the ones that get leisurely meals all the time. And the 7s are basically the ones in poverty. Our main character is named America Singer, and she's a 4, and she plays instruments and sings for restaurants and nightclubs to make a living. And then one day, the selection comes up. It's a big competition to see who will be the wife of Prince Maxen. So 35 girls go to the royal palace and compete for Maxen's affection. The thing is, America has no interest to join this competition because she's already in love with someone. But she is persuaded to by her family just for extra privilege, and her face ends up impressing the board, and she ends up one of the 35 chosen, primarily because she was very happy about being engaged to Aspen. And when she's there, she realizes that while Maxen may not be her first choice, and Maxen might not be her type, maybe he is, but the more important thing right now is there are things that she could change with this position of power. So this was one of the first books I ever read that had a love triangle where actually it seemed like I wasn't sure which boy America would end up with. And I know that a love triangle sounds lame, but in this instance, America is a nice girl. And we can tell that both of these boys have feelings for her, so I didn't want anything bad to happen to any of them. I didn't want any of their feelings to get hurt too bad. And not to mention, there are also rebel attacks that happen once in a while at this place. Some of the rebels are out to just try to find something, and some others are out to kill. And the combination is a book that's, well, pretty much just as easy to read as Michael Vey. I ended up giving each book I've read so far a 3 out of 4. In basic terms, 75. And, well, they're more and more fast-paced with each one. And there's also a bully girl named Celeste, and she keeps the infuriatingness moving. If you want a book that to be easy to read, then you need to have a character that we really despise, so that you can't wait to see what bad thing might happen to her. If nothing bad happens to the evil character, then it might be a bit hard for me to recommend. I don't have any rules about how I review a book. A book could have practically nothing in it happening, and I still might recommend it. We'll see. And the last book that I'm going to be talking about before our music break is the Asylum series by Madeleine Roux, R-O-U-X. And it's a trilogy, and yet it's not. It also has like 5 books in it altogether. It's a trilogy from Asylum to Sanctum to Catacomb, and then there's a book full of novellas and a standalone prequel called Escape from Asylum. And when I picked this book up at the library, I wanted something just fast to read, and I devoured it in just 2 days, and it was so good that not only did I rate it 4 stars out of 4, but everything made the main character feel so trapped. Everything made me feel trapped that sometimes I just wanted to scream for the mystery to be solved. Asylum is a book about an asylum named Brookline in New Hampshire. The thing is, it closed down like 40 to 50 years ago. And now it's a college institute. And a visitor to boost up his portfolio is a teenager named Dan Crawford. And he meets a girl named Abby Valdez and her gay friend Jordan. And together they decide to have a little exploration of this asylum. And cases say they don't return from the basement alone. And now all of a sudden it seems like a spirit is following them and is able to be like 3 steps ahead of them at every turn. And someone is messing with them. We're not sure who. He keeps sending Dan all of these letters and keeps sending them their every location. And some people seem a little intimidated by Dan himself, even though he didn't do anything. And what I think makes this an especially easy read is it's a picture book. I mean, not like Captain Underpants or Diary of a Wimpy Kid but it uses images from real life asylums across its text. And also, if every time a new chapter comes up, it takes up an entire page for it to say chapter number 15 or chapter number 18. And the good thing about that is, if you're looking for a fast read, the pages will really fly by because you're flipping each page just so quickly. And whether or not you actually like the story. But it wouldn't be enough of a recommendation to say this is a fast book unless it really intrigued me. And like I said, there was a mystery that I couldn't help but loving. This book may be in a college institution, but you can still feel like the history of this asylum as you read the book. You can feel the time when the syringes would sting someone's arm and try to put them to sleep, possibly never wake them up again. For the whole time I read this book, I felt like there was someone sneaking up on me to put a knife in my back. I ended up giving the sequel Sanctum a 3.5 out of 4. I liked it pretty much just as much, but there was a scene where I felt like the main characters could have done more to help a certain person. And Catacomb felt a bit out of the other 2, and I ended up giving it a 3 out of 4 because it didn't seem as fast. But but still, it's relatability, especially its great quotes like saying that Dan was nice but toxic, which you will have to read to figure out more of, is one of the reasons why Madeleine Roux is one of my favorite authors now. So now I'm gonna give you a break, and I'm gonna let you listen to some music now, and if you're going, then I hope you tune into riotradio.ca. And when I get back, we're going to be talking about action movies. Have a fun time, or have a fun break. Okay, we're back. So I hope you enjoyed that part about the easy books to read. In fact, there was another book with a similar format from Asylum called Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, but I'm going to be talking about that in a future video, so stay tuned for that. And now, oh, well, while I was putting that book down, one of the books I have right here had stumbled. Don't worry about it, though. So now we're going to talk about action movies and what makes a good action movie for starters. Well, of course, for starters, action, right? I mean, doy. It's like for a good comedy movie, you need comedy, right? Well, you need more than action, though. Like, for instance, watching two guys fight for 5 or even 10 minutes can be a lot of fun. A good thing to make sure of, though, is you have some good choreography, for instance, like something original for the way they're throwing their punches. I mean, I'm not a fan of boxing. Another one who's hosting Riot Radio is, but personally, imagine if you were watching a wrestling movie that was stretched to 90 minutes, but not something like Rocky that had a side story to it, but just punches and punches and kicks and kicks. That wouldn't really be a good action movie. It wouldn't even be a movie if it had no story. And which is what comes in next. You also need some developed characters, and yet you can't develop the characters for too much. Otherwise, by the time everyone has got a hint of who these people are, they'll already have left the theater or they'll be asleep. So here's an example for starters of what I think is a bad action movie, and that is John Wick Chapter 2. I'm sorry, because I know a lot of people love this. It's in the 90s on Rotten Tomatoes. And yet, I didn't see the first John Wick, but I have a feeling that it's quite a lot like this, because I ended up giving it a C-, but then again, it might end up being a lower grade in the future. When you're a critic, you are allowed to change your grades. Sometimes you can change a grade because a movie affected you more or less, even. But basically, John Wick was a movie where I forgot the story almost instantly. It's basically some sort of organization who has blackmail over John Wick, and a bunch of killers are in suits are after him. But here's the main problem I had with this. For starters, it's unbelievability. And when John goes to this underground cavern or this underground hideout, he meets this woman he has some sort of history with. And after a small conversation, she decides to go in her hot tub and decides to slit her wrists open. The only problem with this is this actress just didn't give any delivery. It didn't feel like she was scared of dying. If she wasn't scared of dying, then there should be more of a backstory as to why she was fully ready to die. And when she slits her wrist, she doesn't feel any pain, and she doesn't seem scared about becoming cold dead in a matter of minutes, of saying goodbye to everything. And also, I felt like just John Wick was shooting everyone so well that after a while, he seemed just indestructible. I feel like the good action movies have vulnerable heroes, ones that do occasionally get a little hurt, and ones that might even break a leg or lose someone that they really love. I admit that there's a gunfight that takes place in this other cavern that's completely lit up and is blue and is beautiful, and yet there was nothing that seemed very different from the others. One part that I admit I did like was a fight scene between John Wick and this other older, more bearded man, and they end up fighting until they fall down these stairs and smash through some windows. Eventually, they reluctantly share a drink, and then it goes downhill again because all of a sudden this man is shooting at John Wick as they walk side by side, a few inches and a few feet up in the air apart from them. And neither person is scared about this. I think that it was supposed to be humorous, but the way they were just flat out serious looking, it looked a little ridiculous. And I don't know. I guess that that's enough about me ranting about John Wick Chapter 2, because there are some even worse examples of action movies out there, in my opinion. For instance, these three movies, Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice, Skyfall, and X-Men Apocalypse, are all Ds, in my opinion. I gave a D+ to Batman v Superman, but you get the gist of it. All of these movies were crazy overlong, and as I said, I think had too much character development at the start. And actually, Skyfall, if you ask me, it was just nothing for a while, just a ton of walking around. And in X-Men Apocalypse, I liked the last movie I saw, X-Men Days of Future Past. And honestly, the key shining moment was Quicksilver, played by Evan Peters. He steals every minute that he's in. He was only in Days of Future Past for like 10 minutes, and 1 minute of them in one of the most random places to shoot an action scene, a kitchen, was perfect. The one in X-Men Apocalypse that he's in is even better. But other than that, all of these old and new characters, they felt mixed in like oil and water, and there was not enough time for the new characters to be that enjoyable because they were focusing too much on the old ones. And also the antagonist isn't that good either. I think he's played by Oscar Isaac, the one that wants to end the world and wants the X-Men to dominate it, but really it never really takes its time for a clear view, and the people that he collects to help him, they don't even seem like bad guys really. One of them is dressed in like a purple flower outfit with these pink electric lassos, and she didn't really seem like an antagonist. And not to mention, Skyfall is a James Bond movie, and it's supposed to be full of high-tech gadgets and fun, but this one didn't have anything. One of the characters were saying, what were you expecting, an exploding pen? I kind of wanted something like an exploding pen. I get that maybe Skyfall was trying to be different, but you could have at least had one little thing that was a lot of fun, other than just booby trap a tiny floorboard in the very big climax. I admit, I enjoyed the climax, but getting to it is a major pain. And also, Batman v Superman is a 3-hour-long movie, or maybe it's a 2-hour and 25-minute movie. I ended up watching the extended version because it was the only thing I could find, and honestly, a movie with Batman versus Superman, it has all the fan service imaginable, right? But the thing that I think all of these movies lack, even X-Men Apocalypse, is color. You see, you know how movies shoot a frame of 24 to 30 frames a second? Well, so do our eyes, technically speaking. And so we need something fun to look at, like something as fun as the action scenes, shouldn't we? Like, I get that in the real world, things are painted pretty black and white, aren't they? And these movies are trying to be realistically dark. But, I mean, there are only so many shots of New York that could have been shot in black and white and see no difference before it gets just a little annoying. Besides, a Superman is all colorful. In his suit anyway, so shouldn't a story like this mimic it? I mean, even Batman had some color, in which his suit was very interesting. I get that there are some good moments, but really it seemed like they were taking itself too seriously, and as a result, it ended up falling flat. There's even a dramatic ending. It didn't work for me. But now for some good examples. One good example, I would say, is Captain America Civil War. Actually, that's not a good example, that's a great example. I've watched it like 8 times now, and every time I still get chills, and I still end up thinking about my entire life. Captain America Civil War does something very noble. You see, ever since Iron Man premiered in 2008, there have been 2 other Iron Man movies, 2 Thor movies, 2 Spider-Man reboots, let me think, 2 Avengers movies, and 2 Captain America movies, even an Ant-Man movie, and a Hulk movie. And you see, Captain America Civil War throws all of those movies into a blender and then puts the blender in, like, let's say, how should I say it, a furnace, a burner. It turns all of the Avengers against each other in one swoop, and the result is nothing short of spectacular. You see, Iron Man, it feels like the Avengers should be put in check and should just be run by government now because he feels guilty for the events that have happened in the previous films where people actually do die while we're watching all of the fun. And Captain America, with all of his distrust of big organizations, still feels like the safest hands are the Avengers. And this tears them apart very bad when Captain America's old friend Bucky is accused of a big crime. Or maybe he did do the crime, we're not entirely sure. But this leads to an airport battle that is the most epic, funny in a good way, and dramatic by the end fight scenes I have ever seen in my life. It has everything you could ever want in an Avengers movie in just that one. And also, the movie lets us decide who we're going to root for without really taking a full side, even though this is called Captain America Civil War. Personally, I'm on Team Cap anyway, but all of that gives it an A+, not to mention that Spider-Man comes on, and that's something that Avengers Age of Ultron didn't have, and that's one of the reasons that I was disappointed with Age of Ultron. I gave that movie a C, but this movie an A+. Another example of a good action movie is Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. I've only seen that Mission Impossible movie and the newest one, Rogue Nation, which I gave an A to, but Ghost Protocol, I loved every second of this. It may have a bit of a shallow story, like basically the MRI are accused of blowing up the Kremlin, and there's no more backup. And Ethan Hunt, played by Tom Cruise, and all of his gang have to stop a big nuclear attack. Well, but everything else isn't simplistic. From the music opening that is so creative to the utilization of the gadgetry, from using an entire blank screen that watches eye movements to show off the same hallway that Ethan and Benjamin Dunn are hiding under, minus the 2 of them, as well as sometimes their face masks don't work, and Ethan has to climb up the Dubai Tower, the largest tower in the universe, which was actually really shot in Dubai. Like, if Skyfall had all of these crazy ideas and had all of these crazy exciting scenes, I would have recommended it. So that's how much I loved it. And I also really liked the surprising tenacity of Léa Seydoux' character, Sabine Moreau, a very infamous assassin. Like, all of the actors really impressed me, but I never thought someone like Léa Seydoux could make a character seem so innocent and so sinister when you actually realize her backstory. And now for some examples of some so-so action movies. The first one I wanted to mention was Getaway. It has been critically panned on Rotten Tomatoes, even more than The Last Airbender, at 2%. Getaway is a movie starring Ethan Hawke and Selena Gomez. And Ethan Hawke plays Brent Magma, a former race car driver, and his wife is taken hostage, and Brent's only choice is to drive a very fancy car all around town committing crimes, otherwise his wife will die. I ended up giving it a B, and I think that the reason it was critically panned is because it gets a little repetitive. There's police chase after police chase. There are more chases that happen than I can put on 2 hands, and probably more crashes than there are courses at UOIT. But I liked it because, not just because Brent is a sympathetic character with a great performance, but I was always curious about how Brent and his passenger, who's played by Selena Gomez and isn't given a name, are able to bypass this evil henchman played by Jon Voight. And some of the chases are great, and director Courtney Solomon stated that there was no CGI used. If so, then you can't help but admire how much effort went into these chase scenes, because they're pretty spectacular if there wasn't CGI. And the last example I wanted to do is Spectre, the newest James Bond movie, which I gave a B- to. And even though I gave Skyfall a D, and this is from the same director as Skyfall, I still recommended Spectre. And that's a 38% difference in if I was rating by percentage rather than letters. And I think the main reason I liked Spectre was, well, Léa Seydoux is in this also. She makes every character she plays interesting. And I wasn't really enjoying the movie at first because... But even though there were some gadgets this time, there was a pretty lame motorcycle chase of Bond trying to get Seydoux's character Madeline out of a helicopter. But and it was a little slow. But this felt more relatable to Bond. And Daniel Craig stated he's not going to do Bond ever again. And I was worried and I got interested because this develops his character a little more. And Bond has dated a lot of women. And I was worried that Seydoux's character was going to be wasted. In Spectre, it doesn't. It also takes the chance to tell us the story and connection of all the other Bond villains and all the other Bond stories, some that Daniel Craig hasn't even been in. And the end climax was very good, as well as at the beginning there was a very good one-shot take. I really like one-shots. They show commitment and effort. And so by the end, I decided this is good. I think even though they're probably going to make another Bond movie, I really like this, and I felt like they shouldn't do another Bond movie after this. It leaves it on a good enough high note for Daniel Craig and the character that's going to live with us forever. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do next week. Maybe I'll do comedy movies. Maybe I'll do horror movies. But I really had a lot of fun making this with you, and I can't wait to come back to do this again next week. And I had a lot of fun recording this, and I hope you had fun listening to it. I'm William McGinn, RiotRadio.ca. Once again, don't forget to look for us at Twitter and Instagram at DCSI Riot Radio or RiotRadio.ca. And this was the first episode of Weldon Witness, Bookworm, Film Geek, and Friend. And I'll see you next week.